Hey everyone, this is Eric. I'm with the NewMad Group and the Rural Philanthropy Institute. And again, this year we're back supporting the South Dakota Day of Giving with SD Gives. This is the sixth year. Very exciting to be doing it again. And I think we've learned a lot over the last couple of years, as I hope repeat participants have as well. I'm here with my NewMad colleague, Will. He's our lead writer and communications associate. And we're going to talk a bit about media relations, how organizations can connect with the media, partner with the media locally to help tell their story, amplify the Day of Giving, celebrate generosity and the nonprofit sector, all those good things. So Will, you've been doing quite a bit of media relations with NewMad and with our clients. When we talk about media relations, what are we talking about? What does this look like actually on the ground?
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Well, it can look really different depending on, your organization and your local context. Some of the forms or genres that, our clients like to use are things like, press releases. Those can be about, new initiatives, or they can be more in the form of an announcement of a grant that came out, right? More, personal narrative stories that could be, about the lives of a donor or the lives of someone touched by an organization, and those still have some kind of a compelling hook to them, but really they are a personal story. We write email newsletters that recap a lot of the work going on in organizations. Of course, social media, that's a whole nother video, but writing those kind of posts and in that form. So they can really look quite a bit different depending on what's going on in an organization, but those are the main forms we write in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one thing it's probably important to say about media relations upfront is this is earned media. I was thinking when you said, Will, about newsletters and social media, those are your owned channels. You have to set up and run them yourselves and build your audience. But with media and earned relations, media relations and earned media, you can get or earn access to that wider community, people who may not know about you or be on your email list because they haven't heard of you yet. So it's a great way to cast that wide net. And as you're saying, Will, there's a few different opportunities that you have to get people's attention and talk about your cause.
Yeah.
But what is newsworthy, I think, is a question maybe some people listening are wondering, because sometimes we're so close to the work that we kind of forget that other people may have a particular interest in that work, or they may sort of lose sight of what that interest is. And for us, it's just the day to day, so we don't think to stop and sing it from the rooftops or whatever. But at the same time, not everything is newsworthy. Sort of have to be strategic about what stories and messages you're putting out there. So when you're working with NewMad's clients, what are some of the things you think about in terms of what qualifies an idea to actually become a pitch and go out as a story?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, it's a shame to say, but even really, amazing accomplishments of these organizations aren't necessarily newsworthy without something to contextualize them for a reader in the community. So, you could have written a gigantic grant or awarded an amazing scholarship, but if it's really just left at the level of an announcement, there isn't a lot to draw the reader or an editor at an outlet into that. So I think it's really worth considering not just what stories you tell, but how you help the editor or the audience understand why they are newsworthy by giving some context. So I think when you're trying to position the work that your organization is doing, it's important to think about challenges in the community and the ways that your organization is kind of stepping into that challenge to provide assistance. Think about things that are going on in the community, even something as simple as it's back to school time, students are facing this challenge, and this program that we have is really timely. So I think timeliness is another way to think of why something is newsworthy. And you don't want it to be a surprise why something is newsworthy, or that's part of the work, I think, of earning this this coverage, helping an editor understand exactly what your organization is doing and why it would matter to a local reader.
Yeah, that's a great point, Will. And we'll maybe in just a couple minutes get into talking about the pitch and how do you actually bring this in front of an editor or a reporter. But I want to bring it back just for a second to the Day of Giving itself, and
Mhm.
talking about what is newsworthy. Is your campaign newsworthy?
Mhm.
Well, it really depends, to your point, on how you make it newsworthy. What is
Yeah.
the context you bring to it, and how are you using that campaign? Which is, it's a great occasion to be
Mhm.
talking and having these conversations, but how are you using it to raise awareness of those challenges, of your impact, the impact your campaign could have on the community or on the challenge that you face? So those are all really important considerations, I
Mhm.
think, for the Day of Giving, as it
Yeah.
gets closer and closer. Um, and one thing we have talked about in the past is, if a dozen or more nonprofits, say in a community or in a county, are all mounting Day of Giving campaigns and
Mhm.
all pitching stories about their campaigns to the media, that doesn't necessarily put the media in the best position to help tell those stories. And
Yeah.
so I think we've seen some really great examples in the past where groups have come together to tell a collaborative story or make a collaborative pitch to the media
Mhm.
about the campaign, the Day of Giving, but also, again, the impact of the sector, and the impact
Yeah.
of all the work collectively. And I'll make a quick plug for the contests and the prizes.
All
We've
right.
got a separate video on those specifically if you haven't seen them yet. Um, but we have a prize that will be awarded after the Day of Giving,
Mhm.
that will go to um, nonprofits who have collaborated on a media release or a media announcement. So take a look at that on the website, and that will take a little bit of advanced planning and coordination, of course, but another great way to get the story out there, into the media.
Excellent.
And so, Will, you're not just consulting with clients on what to tell and how to do it, but you're also often the one sitting down and doing the writing. So I think you probably have some great tips about, nitty gritty.
Mhm.
What do you do when you sit down to make a pitch that's compelling, that is going to get the attention of an editor?
Mhm.
Um, what tips do you have?
Well, it starts, maybe to go back even further, it's really starting with, getting some really good information. And we often do that through interviews, and that can be interviews with staff members or team members at an organization, or often with the people who are, benefiting from the work being done by the organization. And those conversations are always really illuminating. But it's a lot of work to get out, the correct or the, most compelling story from someone, especially if it's someone who isn't used to being interviewed all the time. So a great, something I've really rely on myself is asking questions that are not all, fact based, but really focusing on the feelings that people have, their memories of people that they touched, or that kind of influence their path, how they actually felt by interacting with your organization, and really leaning into those details, those feelings, I think can really make quotes and stories a lot more compelling, and impactful. So that's kind of where it begins. In the actual act of writing, less is really always more, or regardless of what form you're writing in. So short pieces, even small paragraphs that can make it easier for an editor to, move the text around, only use part of it. Short sentences are more readable. So things like that are really make a impact. It's also, something we do a lot is using the same content in multiple spaces. So if you're writing in this way, it's really easy to take, those three lead paragraphs and, put them at the top of your newsletter, or to take the first paragraph and turn it into a social media post with a little bit of work. So it really helps when you're trying to get the most out of, the work you've done to collect that story and write that piece. So but then when you've got something you're really happy with, you've had some folks at your organization look through it, you're really excited to share it. Um, the technique we use at NewMad is through email pitches. And so to do that, we write just a very, short to the point email. Again, back to this point of context and newsworthiness. It's written to the editor of an outlet, explaining to them, what's going on here. Maybe there's an event happening, maybe a date, or a big number at the top, a fundraising goal or an achievement, and then a short statement explaining why this matters to the city, to the community, to those that are going to be reading it. And a short piece like that, and send, the finished article right along with it. And that's, usually enough to to get an editor on board, and often they'll maybe write back and want to do an interview to expand that. They'll want more details. Photographs can be great to include, things like that. It does take a little legwork to make those contacts when you're starting, but just kind of looking out in your community, what are the major newspapers, major radio stations, news channels? Are there weekly readers that are looking, or kind of those kind of smaller papers that are looking for stories? And they'll always have contact information available. Find an editor there, start building that relationship. If you keep sending them well-written, engaging material, they'll be very happy to work with you more and more in the future, we've found.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just thinking back to this terminology we have, earned media, it's that strategic element that you're talking about, Will. We've all got great stories to tell, but getting them there and getting them into the right hands and, helping the right hands know what to do with it. There's a bit of strategy involved and hard work, and it may take time to build up those relationships with editors. We're thinking about media relations around the Day of Giving. We've got a couple months out from that, so maybe there's a way to pitch a story soon and sort of start to build that momentum. And then again, closer to the day or after the day. So be thinking a little bit expansively, but every time you make a pitch, that's an opportunity to earn that trust, become that credible source for that reporter who, they may be looking for a story in the future and say, hey, I wonder what so-and-so has for me this time. And that's a place you really want to be, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, I mean, maybe it's easy to say, we don't need to go overboard on the strategy, but it's absolutely worth sitting down. You have an event coming up in December, start talking about it now. What do we need to start, maybe educating people about now? What stories can we tell to build up to this? What do we do around the event? How do we follow that up with, kind of the next thing? And it's well worth your time to chart that out, with dates. Here's how we're going to approach it, see what works. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe just a closing note from us. We at SD Gives are, doing some legwork ourselves to get the Day of Giving out in the media. And of course, Giving Tuesday has put it on the map in a big way as well. So hopefully the time is ripe for this kind of storytelling in every community across the state. It hopefully is sort of primed for being receptive to individual examples, individual stories, human stories about the amazing work that's being done. So best of luck to everybody who goes out and, bravely pitches. It's well worth the time it takes. Well, thanks, Will.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have our fingers crossed for everyone sending their email pitches.